isn't able to join. So let me find it again. Invite. Yeah. Here we are. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. How is the weather there? It's afternoon, maybe?
Yeah, it's afternoon and it's still a bit cold. It can be warmer. And where are you?
Okay.
Is it hot?
It's so damn hot in Kochi here. Temperature is literally somewhere around 40, I think, the feeling temperature.
Ooh.
So thank you for joining. And maybe we can wait for a minute or two
Sure.
for others to join. Yeah, because initially I think some people came and we couldn't uh, join. So I think we can wait for a while. So right now, where you stay? You are like in the institute?
No, today I'm working from home.
Working from. Okay. And apparently, I was just saying your master's is from Pondicherry University,
Yeah.
and mine is
Oh,
too.
really?
Yeah, so a different department though. I think you have done from ecology department.
Yeah.
And I think we lost Ashwini. We got it back. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my department was marine biology. Yours was ecology, right?
Yeah. So did you do the marine biology course in Port Blair?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you have worked in Andaman and Nicobar for a while. So yeah. So shall we start or?
Yeah, go ahead. I think all the names there and a few of them are my old friends and yeah. It's good. Yeah.
So before we kickstart and before I go back where it all started, can you please just brief us what is your current topic of your research?
So right now I do something called comparative genomics. So where I'm comparing whole genome sequences, during COVID time, became the word that was, it's a bit more publicly, the public is more aware about genomes. Sequence it, you identify what it is. So we can sequence something every species, and we are comparing genomes species of sedges. They are grass-like plants. Super interesting. They have some really cool evolutionary things going on in their genomes. So basically, my day looks very much computational. I'm in the computer, or very rarely I have.
Oh, so it's like, do you have the lab work? Like you have to extract the genome and do the sequencing, that kind of stuff, or you get the data and you need to do the bioinformatic work?
It's both. It's a bit of both. So for genome sequencing, standard ones will be done by companies, but some other I have to do some lab work before we send the samples out.
Okay. So now we are here on talking about plants. But as I was going through I was doing a bit of research. Uh, your journey started in Agumbe, if I'm not wrong, with an
Yeah.
internship.
Yeah.
So what was that all about, your internship time, and which species if you focused?
So I got the exposure of the Kalinga Foundation in Agumbe through a course that when I was in bachelor's, they collaborated with a very young group of people called Nirvana Nomads and Agumbe, and he had this incredible interest back then, reptiles and amphibians in Agumbe. It was like a very eye-opening situation for me because I never knew that there is so much biodiversity so close to home because I'm from Bangalore. And so after that, after my bachelor's, Kalinga Foundation, if I could intern with them, and then I work generally with, say, more on the education front, where I was part of their work one of their, let's say, lists, who could identify species, show it to people, well, about its ecology. So this was like my homework of biodiversity. Bachelor's was in ethics. So I basically discovered the field, and it was an incredible experience because you could see the diversity every day on a daily. Fantastic.
And it was that time that was your bachelor's, during your bachelor's,
Just
right?
after my bachelor's, yeah.
Just after your bachelor's.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, you did master's from Pondicherry in ecology department.
Yeah.
So was it that? I think one of your friend has asked something. There's a lot of background noise. Can something be done about it? Thanks. Background noise, which like when Ashwini is speaking or when myself? If you can please clear it out.
Oh, people are
Because
saying,
actually,
I think it's probably, I could be wrong, but do you think it's you?
okay, one AC is working again. Maybe I can switch off that one.
Oh no, apparently it's on my. I'm gonna try and connect to the earphones and see if that helps.
Your voice is actually, when it is coming, then it is actually
Is it
going in
better
between
now?
sometimes. Yeah, yeah, I think it's better. Yes, when Ashwini speaks. Okay. Yeah, I think in between it is just dipping. It was dipping somewhere.
Is it better now? Oh yeah. No,
Yeah, I
no,
can.
no one
Yeah,
has.
I can. I
Okay.
can. I can.
Oh, okay. Lots of people are responding. Okay, much better. Okay, great. I can shout if you want.
Okay, so many have answered. Yeah, thanks. Thank you for letting us know. So after your bachelor's, then you worked in Agumbe, and that was followed by your master's. And
Yeah.
was it that time you came in contact with ISC?
Yeah, so after my bachelor's, I have to highlight that after my bachelor's, I took a year break, which is a very notorious thing to do when you're from a middle class family. You have to justify this to everyone, like not just your parents, your relatives, your friends who've started earning in Bangalore. So I took a break and I was in Agumbe, but I was also coming back to Bangalore. Through Kalinga Foundation, I got introduced to IISc because they had a job opening, they had an internship opening. And because I had the right skill sets, because my background was in genetics, I joined IISc as an intern to do lab work in Karthik Shankar's lab. And that's when I started my, let's say, long-standing collaboration with that lab in IISc.
And you worked on frog, rainy day.
Yes, yes.
People know you like Chipkali, as your title, your handle
Yeah.
goes, and more about gecko. But when I was going through, actually, it's not only gecko. Gecko takes a major part of chunk of your, I think, research journey. But you have worked on frogs and snakes as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So the frog project, the first project when
Yeah.
I was an intern, it was actually a postdoc's project, and the postdoc was someone called KP Dinesh. He's a permanent staff scientist in ZSI now. So he was studying Ranidae in the Western Ghats, and I was working as an intern in his project, doing the lab work mostly. But yeah, that was a very, very interesting project. And like, so being an intern in IISc, as a person who never, let me just say, as a person who never passed any of these entrance exams and got into the bigger institutes in India, I was there through a alternative path where I didn't have to, pass entrance exams. It's a situation where you're in the right place at the right time and you get an internship opportunity. And that gave me the exposure to ecological sciences research in IISc because as an intern, I could attend all the talks, I could meet all the other PhD students and the postdocs in the department, and it gave me so much more exposure than
I think I lost somewhere because my internet, I just saw it went off. Am I
Ah,
am I audible now?
yeah.
Yeah. We were in internship part. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, my point was that, without passing any of these really competitive entrance exams, I had the exposure to an environment like Indian Institute of Science, which I think is a huge privilege and comes to people who are in and around Bangalore, or if you can afford to come to Bangalore just for an internship, something like that.
And you are in I think ISC's ecology department, which gives quite a great opportunity to interact
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
great minds.
Interact and network and get to know what is happening in terms of ecological research, and a very good set of people, like including the students and the PIs and everyone else as well.
And uh, amazingly, you just said कि although you haven't you know cleared all those big sorts of exams, but your profile is full of grants. So
It's very
uh,
reassuring, no? Because it's
yeah.
always, I think I spoke about this recently when I was in a conference. I've always had this imposter syndrome about not being part of any big institutes in India, right? I was never a student in IISc or IIT or ICER or all these big places, because I was never good with entrance exams. And of course, back then, the Ashwini back then thought, okay, I'm really crap, and I'm just gonna go to my master's in Pondi, which was actually one of the good courses back then. Like it was well known, the ecology course was known. And it sort of affects your confidence when you want to do research, but getting grants apparently is a whole other game. Like it's not essentially to do with your ranking or your entrance exams or your scores in the university. It's more about sort of visualizing a project, coming up with ideas, innovative ideas, and even having the sort of practical thinking of how you're going to implement it. So
So all this you learned while you were having projects working in IC.
yeah, in ISC as well as during my master's, we had very good professors. We learned, I think in the end, these kind of skill sets about, thinking about projects or writing about projects, you need to have a very good network of mentoring people who are either, your own age group or maybe slightly older than you. It's not necessarily these old senior professors who are going to help you, but you need a community of people who are like-minded around you, who will look at your proposal and tell you what is good, what is bad. And I think I've always had these kind of people around me, and they've played a very important role in sort of saying this is practical, this is not practical. Did you think about this? And it's very important to have friends who are going to question you, or colleagues who are going to question you. So that will sort of improve your proposal and your chances of getting funding, essentially.
And how was it in CCMB? You have worked there also?
Yeah, it was a very interesting time. It was actually quite good because that was after my master's, so I was a bit more clearer about what I wanted. And it was the year where I had applied to, I'd spent a lot of money applying to universities to do a PhD outside India, as well as I think written a couple of entrance exams, where I didn't have enough cutoff. And I even wrote GRE, I wrote TOEFL, I wrote like a bunch of things, and I applied to so many PhD programs. I had an Excel sheet with all the professors that I approached and how many of them replied and where I applied, and I actually didn't make it to any of them. So that year, I was like, okay, I need some source of income. I cannot, like, I was doing part-time teaching in Bangalore to some really rich kids. So that really helped me have some salary on a monthly basis.
Where you taught mathematics and science?
Yes. I don't know where you read all of this, but you seem to know a lot.
I did my homework.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, so at that point of time, I had to like take up a GRF position. So I applied to CCMB as they had open position. I went, wrote their entrance exam, gave the interview, and got a job. So I worked there for a few months.
And it was during that time you got 1 month internship in Germany?
Yeah, so what happened was Again, going back to the year where I did not get any jobs or like any PhD positions, I had written cold emails to people about, several topics that I was interested in. I had written to this professor in Germany saying there is a species of day gecko, the one in Andamans, the bright green colored species, right? It is a special one because all the closest relatives of that species are in Madagascar and other West Indian Ocean islands. So I wrote to the professor saying I'm interested to work on the species, and there seems to be not much research done. Uh, so the professor was like, yeah, great, but like I don't have any funding at the moment. Do you have any funding? I was like, I have no funding. And the next year, when I was working in CCMB, I had applied to a bunch of small independent grants like the INLAC's Siv Dasani Foundation, Ravi Sankaran Foundation, and the Rufford Foundation to go back to the Andamans and actually study all the geckos there and sort of understand the distribution of different species and also have a better assessment of gene flow between populations and both from a conservation and speciation point of view. And I was I got all of the grants that I applied to,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
something I had completely not expected. It was completely out of the blue, and it gave me a massive confidence boost. And then I said, okay, I'm going to quit CCMB because now I have my own project money, and it's going to give me some sustenance when I'm in the Andamans. And that's when I forgot what you asked me actually. Oh yeah, because I had that grant money. Yeah, sorry, because I had that grant money, I wrote back to the same professor after a year and told him, hey, I have some money. So I'm going to start this project anyway, whether I do a PhD with you or not, but let me know what you think. And then he said, oh, great, why don't you come and do an internship in the lab here in Germany. I will fund your flight and living costs for a month because I don't really work with people I don't know. It would be great if you stay for a month and we start some preliminary work. So that's how I ended up in Germany for a month. And when I was there, we worked on the proposal for a scholarship that the German government gives. And then I came back to India and then we applied for the scholarship.
DAAD.
Yeah.
That you got for your PhD.
Yeah.
So it was that time you got connected with this German scientist and you conducted your research here.
Yeah. So I was doing the Andaman Gecko project anyway, but I had applied to the scholarship in the hope that if I get it, a part of the Andaman Gecko work will also be part of my PhD. So that was the plan. But if I didn't get it, I would still continue the project with the funding that I had for a year and a half.
Okay. I'm about to come to the PhD part. Before that, I just wanted to ask curiously, what attracted you towards gecko? Because you had worked on frogs and even snakes, like egg-eating snakes, Andaman keelback. So, was there a gap in the research? What attracted you, or combination of different things?
That's a very good question. I think a combination of different things. See, when you think about snakes as cool and charismatic they are, sampling them can be quite difficult, depending on the kind of sample you want to collect and the kind of study you want to do. So because I did my master thesis with the Andaman keelback, it sort of opened my eyes to the limitations of working with snakes. We sampled quite a lot of them, but it was still very challenging in terms of time and logistics and the people who would want to work with you. For example, people are scared to catch snakes. So if you want field assistance, it's not as easy. And then I don't know, like people who've been to the Andamans would sort of probably, relate with this that when you go there, like the density of reptiles seem to be really high. You see a lot of lizards, you see a lot of geckos, and as well as like agamid lizards, as in the endemic species over there. And also the Phelsuma, the green one, and because it is so unique, and because rest of the other geckos that you see are very similar to Southeast Asia and South Asia, I think all of these factors sort of, attracted me towards geckos.
Problems in collecting samples. I know, like putting traps and expecting their tail to fall into that and seeing them empty all the time. So apart from these experiences, having first of all, like Is there any other experience while sampling you find difficulty sampling during your gecko project?
I mean, apart from catching geckos, because they don't fall into any traps, right? Geckos, you can't trap them, neither can you trap snakes, the big snakes, not very successfully. So you have to do active catching. So catching them is actually quite hard. It depends on the species. The green ones, the day geckos, are very difficult to capture. So that was actually fun and challenging at the same time. But yeah, we've had like lots of other field challenges that, most people who do field work will be able to relate to. Like you have to, from arranging a vehicle to getting your permits, getting your forest department permits, it's a biggest hurdle and it takes a lot of time and patience. And once you have it, you need people to work with and sort of plan on a daily basis. In the islands, you have additional challenges, right? You can get to an island and you have 5 days to sample there, and all 5 days there can be a cyclone. And then you're basically, you just have to sit somewhere and you can't sample. Your time is gone. And if you miss a boat, for example, you will not have another boat for one more week. So this kind of challenge is more island specific. But apart from that, field challenges are everywhere. And yeah, definitely we had our share.
And you also mentioned that you face socio-political issues there and uh, in getting clearances and all for sampling. Was that a case? Like working with people there, the departments getting access to certain area. Was that an issue for you while sampling during your sampling period?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an issue because it takes time and it takes time for everybody, including myself. So was it special? No. Do
Mhm.
everybody go through the same thing? Yes.
So what are those difficulties actually?
So basically, bureaucratic work in terms of getting forest department permits takes a lot of time. So from the day you apply, there are several panels who meet. Then you have to go present your research in a panel. And after you present, you are asked a lot of questions, some of which make a lot of sense, but some of which are also very sort of existential, like why are you here? Why do you want to do this? What's the use of this work? And it is challenging, but I have to say, working with forest department officials, which who are completely different stakeholders in your research, will sort of make us more sensitive of what society is expecting from research, because the questions that they're asking are the same kind of questions that our parents might ask, right? And
Yeah.
these are challenging questions to answer. So the facing all of this will sort of make you better at answering these questions, and also you think more about these questions. So I think the whole experience was a very important part of growth for me. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Any peculiar incident you remember when you remember Port Blair or Andaman for that matter, and you're sampling that clicks in your head? Oh, that was
There's a few.
like
Okay. There's one from Little Andaman where me and Suresh, so Suresh used to work with me when we used to catch keelbacks. He was, I wouldn't call him my field assistant, he was the field boss. And so keelbacks are freshwater snakes, so they're inside the water normally, and catching them is very difficult if you're outside the water because they slip away. So one of the ways that we used to capture them was walk in the water. So we are in the water with like flip-flops, and then we, try to spot them, and we spot them, we get into the water, and we capture them with all this. Like, there's a lot of drama around capturing them because keelbacks are very, very active snakes, and when you catch them, they bite you. Anyway, all of this apart, we were in Little Andaman and we had to walk in a nala. So in Hindi, like these little streams are called nalas. So we got into a nala and we were like, we both are walking, walking, walking. We walked for almost like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we took different branches of the nalas. We came back as well, and then we realized like we couldn't find a single keelback because keelbacks, they're only present in pure fresh water most of the time, right? Like you cannot have, it's not very common to find keelbacks in brackish water streams. They don't prefer that as much as pure freshwater streams. And because these are islands, at some point the water will, contact seawater and you have some mixing. So you need to go very inland for freshwater streams. And we came out of the Nala, and there were two uncles sitting
Mm-hmm.
on the side of the road, and they had their beedies. They were like, हाँ हाँ कैसा था क्या कर रहे थे? We were like, हाँ हम तो सांप ढूंढ रहे थे. We couldn't see anything. And they're like, अरे यहाँ पे तो मगर है, यहाँ पे नहीं होता वो सांप. And we're like, oh my God, we were so, in
Came
retrospect,
out
we were
of the
so,
crocodile.
yeah, and apparently they spot small baby crocs in that Nala because it's not a very big Nala, right? You cannot have the big saltwater crocodile there, but they do apparently have smaller ones. And after that, Suresh was so scared to get into the water. He's like, यहाँ पे मगर नहीं है ना? पक्का, पक्का हम किसी से पूछ के जाएंगे. And we were every time we were analyzing our decisions, but we were scared that night. We were like, thank God we got out of it all right, because it was not a good, yeah.
It was a good day. Because even when we were there, when I was doing my master's there in Pondicherry, we heard one casualty which was caused by a croc. Although it was a salt water,
Yeah.
so it's quite famous for that. And how was your like you have not only worked on Andaman Islands, you have worked on other islands as well, isn't it? Is it
Yes.
Madagascar? I can't recall it properly.
So Madagascar, yes, but I've actually never been to Madagascar. Had access to samples collected by other people through many years of research when they were working in Madagascar. But I was working in these islands called Comoros. So Comoros are in between continental Africa and Madagascar. These are really tiny volcanic islands. I mean, tiny in the sense they're a country, of course, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not as big as Madagascar. So, beside Madagascar, they look tiny. And on the other side, there is Mauritius and another island called Reunion. And I also worked there. Again, they're also of volcanic, origin, yeah.
And just remembered one incident I think you have mentioned somewhere that you went for sampling and night cows came and ate your dinner or
Yeah.
your what was that?
Yeah. So that was actually, it was not sampling because we were in very high elevation. So we had to hike up to the volcano, the active volcano, Kartala. So the name of the volcano is Kartala, and this is in the island of Grand Comoro. And to some point, we got dropped off, and from there we had to hike. And next day, we had to hike from the second point. So it was a long hike. And the place where we put our tents, we had this sacks of baguette. So Comoros was ex-French colony. So they were colonized by the French, and so they speak French language as well as the food can be a bit French. Like they have baguettes, long bread sticks basically. And we had a lot of baguettes. That was essentially going to be our next day and the day after's food. And during night, we heard cows, on the slopes of the mountain where we had our tents, but we didn't think much about it because they are cows. And next day morning, we come and the bags are empty and we see some breadcrumbs everywhere. So all our food was eaten by cows. And we lived on like raw banana and breadfruit and some really dry food. And because I'm a vegetarian, it was worse for me compared to the others, but we survived it. Yeah.
So it was like you had to hike and do the sampling.
No, actually, very high up in the volcanoes, you cannot find these geckos. So we were hiking mostly because we were there and we wanted to see the volcano, right? It's a fascinating part of the. But in the lower slopes of the volcano, we did sample, but not after we went up. So the next day, we just had to hike up and then go all the way back down.
So how you used to collect the sample? Like how you used to trap them or get their fecal material or trying to get their tail which fell off. So how you used to collect the sample?
So, as much as possible, we try to capture the individual, like not by trap, just by hand capture, because most geckos are very sensitive. Like you can't use noose and other capture methods that you can use for larger lizards. Larger lizards have, much harder skin around their neck. They don't really cut them even if you make a noose, but geckos can be quite sensitive, so we don't really use any capture methods apart from just hand grabbing them. So we hand grab them and then we measure their body length and we try to cut the tip of their tail, unless, like you said, unless the gecko already dropped the tail because it is so stressed out that sometimes that's the defense strategy, right? Dropping the tail and distracting the predator. So we do that, and for the fecal samples, I used to massage their belly just a little bit, and then just give a light massage, and then they'll poop, and then you collect that immediately in like 99% ethanol. So we collected everything in very pure alcohol and stored in little tubes. So we had to carry these boxes of little tubes and pure ethanol everywhere we went for sampling.
And where you were doing your lab work?
So for that project that was part of my PhD, all the lab work was in Germany. In my
Coming to Germany, I was just reading somewhere like you had very much. German is quite tough from any person I hear. So how was your experience in Germany to mingle with surrounding, and how was it?
So, it's been many years since I moved. If you had asked me this question in the first 6 months that I moved to Germany, I really struggled a lot because so I started my PhD in October and immediately it was winter. And, most Indians or any people from tropical countries struggle with that aspect a lot, both in terms of temperature, but also in terms of the number of hours you get sunlight. So at 4 o'clock, 4:30, sun sets, and in your brain, you're like, wait, I'm supposed to be working, but I'm actually already tired. So all of this had a huge impact mentally. I think the first 6 months were very tough until I started making friends. So just having people around me helped a lot. And after that, Germany has been very, very nice. Of course, it has. Immigration has its upsides and downsides as well. You're alone in a country, whose language you cannot speak very well. So there are these daily life challenges, but with having the right kind of people around you, it definitely makes it much better.
And there also, I have seen some of my friends' stories and all. The boards will be in German and won't be in English, so you'll have to, you should know German for that.
Yeah, I learned basic German. So this is for someone who might be interested in applying for the DAAD scholarship. So if you get a DAAD scholarship, they will give you, if you get a DAAD scholarship and if you're proficient in English, they will give you at least first 2 levels of German as part of your starting, time. So the first 2 months in Germany, because I already moved there in July or August, the first 2 months was basically just learning the language. And the great thing about that opportunity was that DAAD puts all the scholars of that year together in one city. So you meet people from all over the world, and everyone is struggling just like you to learn German. And you do basic 2 levels, and then you know how to survive basically, like you said, to read the board, to understand what the train announcer is saying, or to buy groceries, and all the basic necessities will get covered by that.
Okay. So funding is sufficient enough for this DART funding, the fellowship amount and stipend?
That's a very good question. Thanks for asking. So for me, it was fine because I was in a smaller city. And but I know that I have friends who were in Berlin and Munich, which are big cities, where rent is very expensive and the DAD scholarship might not be enough, or it might be just enough. So it would be very difficult, sort of like, living salary to salary sort of a situation. Mm, so in those kind of cases, what professors do sometimes is if they have extra money in their own lab, they try to supplement the scholarship holder's salary by giving them like in German it's called a Hiwi job. So it's like you're helping the professor to correct papers, or you're doing those kind of jobs like a teaching assistant, and that pays you a little bit of money. So that adds to your salary. So that way you could find ways of getting extra money if you're in a big city. Otherwise, it's okay. You can manage.
I was just imagining those work here in India, scholars do for free for their PIs. And I think even more than that they do. So in that sense, I think it was much better doing PhD there, isn't it? And
In retrospect, I think it was great. But at that point of time, I felt like I could have done better with 1 year of coursework. How we have in India, you have 1 year of coursework, then you have some time to think about your project proposal, then you defend your proposal, then you start your research. Sure, that takes, you know, 2 more years of your time, but at that point, I was thinking that I didn't have enough background to switch into evolutionary biology, but you sort of learn on the go, and I think most PhDs learn on the go anyway. So now that I think about it, I'm really happy that I finished my PhD in whatever time frame I could finish, because any longer, I think mentally it would have been much more difficult to sort of get out of it.
Yeah, good you mentioned about this, mental situations and all. How's your mentally and emotionally? How's your PhD time during like time in Germany, not in India? How was it during PhD?
Um, it was it was mixed. There were happy days, there were sad days, and there's also very demotivated times, but there were also days where I was motivated. So in Germany, you have these two options to finish your PhD. You can do a full thesis, like the book that we write, like in India, or you can do something called a cumulative thesis, where you publish papers, you put the papers together as different chapters. Anything unpublished, you can add them as additional chapters, and then you write an introduction, your discussion, and then you submit. That's your thesis. So that is the option that I took. So the thing was, in 3 years or 3.5 years, I had to have 3 papers published. Plus, I had a couple of chapters which were unpublished. So it was, looking back, it was a lot of work. But of course, when I was doing that, I was surrounded by people who were doing incredible work. And some of the people who passed out of my lab before I joined have crazy publications in the 3.5 years that they were. So my standards of comparison were with them, and I had this massive imposter syndrome. But once I got out of it and I looked back, I was like, oh my God, I managed to do so much. And I really did not appreciate that at that point of time, because you don't have the sight, you don't think about it that way. Um, but yeah, I think it was definitely a difficult journey in many, many ways. So, as I said, your people matter a lot, especially when you're in a foreign country. You're in a foreign country for a degree, and sometimes you think about this, okay, what does it mean to my life? Like, what am I doing here? In those kind of situations, you need your friends with you. And because I had friends and I had my partner, both of us were doing our PhDs, we did it together. You had that sort of relation where you could talk about these things. It helped a lot. But if I was alone and without the friends that I had, I think it would have been a lot more difficult. Plus, I finished during COVID. That was an additional challenge. So it was a desperate time, I have to say.
I think I read somewhere, cold and lonely nights can be very harsh sometimes there. Someone who has traveled all the way from this part to that part. And
Yeah.
your extracurricular activities, you must be doing something, isn't it? To keep yourself engaged.
So in Germany, I'm so really thankful, because there is a sense of work-life balance which is very strict. A lot of people follow that. They don't work on Saturdays, they don't work on Sundays. And during my PhD, I have to say I only worked on Saturdays and Sundays when I had a deadline or when I was submitting my thesis. So most of the time I did not, and that gave me time to play badminton. And also I started the sketching group. So every Sunday we would meet and go to a different place and sketch. Through the sketching group, I met a lot of Germans who had nothing to do with science, but I made friends who were outside this field in general, and it gave me, like, a balanced social life in terms of yeah.
That helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Someone has just commented going great so far. I think you can read that comment.
Yeah, that's Sneha. Bye, Sneha.
I was about to ask something. I just got inside this one. Yeah, so that was about your PhD. So when you are done when you completed your PhD, I think in 2020, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I defended in 2021 March.
I think around that time only one of your paper on gecko came, no, in scientific report.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, that was 2020.
then how you got into Natural History Museum after that for your postdoc?
Yeah. So while I was, yeah, so before I submitted, so back then, the rules were a bit different, so I'll come back to it. Before I finished my thesis, I could already apply for a postdoctoral fellowship. And I had some ideas inspired from some PhD work, but also inspired from reading research that others were doing. And I had applied to this advertised postdoc position from NHM London. So there is a researcher called Natalie Cooper, and she had advertised a position in NHM, and I'd applied to that. And I got rejected from that position. But Natalie wrote me such a great email. She's like, "Oh, I was one of the best applicants. I'm really sorry that you couldn't get it." And it was so kind because I was not sure if I should be sad or if I should be happy because of that rejection because the email was so great. And then, and I had some ideas that I think I put in when I applied for the job. I can't remember very clearly, but she also recommended that I get in touch with another researcher in NHM. And this is the same researcher I had written to like many years ago, the year where I got rejected from all the PhD applications. It's the same researcher I had written to many years ago. So it was like, oh, correct. So it's like a connecting dot situation. So I wrote to him and then we spoke about it and we reflected off each other's ideas, developed it a little bit more. Also got in touch with another researcher who's also in NHM, and together we, applied for the scholarship, like fellowship from the EU.
Marie
Yeah.
Curie.
Yeah.
That was Marie Curie, right?
Sorry.
That was Marie Curie
Yeah.
fellowship you got, no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds to be quite prestigious here if you
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah. I mean, it
And
is
as we
very
have
prestigious,
always,
and like when I applied, like I honestly didn't think I'll get. The idea was we apply with whatever ideas we had. If we get rejected, at least we get reviewer comments to improve the proposal. So if we get rejected, we apply next year again. It's a bit more realistic because yeah, you can't expect to get these kind of things on the first go. And if you get it, great, but otherwise, no.
you must be so happy that time.
I was
And
really happy. I was really happy.
and a full circle, you applied to the same professor and now finally joining there as a postdoc.
Yeah, it is full circle in very weird ways. Yeah.
And there you work not only on geckos, but all those who are relatives of gecko, is it?
No, actually,
How
that
does
was a bit of a
it?
switch. That was a bit of a switch. I have to say, like, I think through the progress of my career, I have gone from being very organism focused to more question focused. And then, so during this postdoc, we were actually addressing something with respect to how to measure genomic rearrangements. And for that, we wanted to use published genomes. And the group of organisms on which there are a lot of published genomes are mammals. So we were developing like a pipeline and implementing on mammalian genomes. So I actually didn't do anything directly with geckos, but of course we had other side projects. Like Jeff and I had other projects. We had a master thesis student where we looked at gecko skull shape evolution. So it was always like ongoing, but my main research path, I would say, shifted after my PhD.
And that was followed by your current uh, postdoctoral fellowship that now you are focusing more on. I just read something about chromosomes. What
Mm-hmm.
was that? I'm not able to. In your somewhere crossing over of chromosome you're working on mapping something like that.
Yeah, so I think you might be thinking of the centromeres, right? Holocentromeric chromosomes. I could have
Are you
mentioned that
working
somewhere.
on?
Yeah, so when I said comparing genomes, what I'm trying to do is study these chromosomes, which are kind of wacky because generally, if you think about all vertebrates, all higher animals, as we call them, have one centromere per chromosome, but there are organisms across the tree of life, like butterflies, moths, lots of plant groups. Their chromosomes have many centromeres distributed across. So that changes the evolutionary implications of how genomes can evolve, both structurally as well as in the sequences. And the plant group that my current project is focused on actually is holocentromeric, which means they have many centromeres across the chromosome. So they have a lot of things going on. Yeah.
Trying to figure out the process, how it happens, so that you can,
Sorry, I think I
and how.
lost you.
So you're trying to figure out this process in the cell you are working in, that plant cell you are working on, this process
Yeah,
of centromere.
we are trying to figure out how chromosomes can undergo fission and fusion very quickly in these organisms and which parts of the genomes are involved in these processes. So it's a bit more technical and I'm trying to sort of simplify in my head. So for this, you have to look at the genomes and try to identify these particular sequences that are involved in these events. And we're looking at how they evolve.
That technical session maybe we can have one separately. So someone person has asked, Tanisha has asked actually, what's the most fascinating thing about gecko?
Ooh. I think from from a person who really loves biogeography, you know how species are distributed where and why. Geckos are very good systems, and I think that's why I really like working on them. So they're not like frogs, which are very sensitive and have much how do I say, they have lesser probability to spread very to larger areas. So if you think about birds, right? Birds are very good dispersers because they fly.
Mhm.
And if you think about frogs in terms of islands, there are many of these oceanic island groups. They don't have frogs at all because frogs did not arrive there because they are also quite sensitive to transoceanic dispersal events and they're not very successful at those things. But geckos have hard-shelled eggs. Even though they are small-bodied, they have hard-shelled eggs. So they disperse quite well through eggs as well as adult individuals, much more than we expect just looking at their body size. So their biology makes them very interesting.
Hard shell eggs like we see in Game of Thrones, that queen of dragon.
Yeah.
It's hardly hardly struck in my head, those eggs.
I mean,
So
not
I think
that
we have
hard, I
completed.
don't think.
Yeah, oddly that came to my mind. Before we wrap up, how's your this Net Geo grant you got? So you worked with the Net Geo or for?
No, it was a grant. So they have a funding scheme where they fund researchers, conservationists, filmmakers, photographers on different projects that is related to biodiversity and wildlife and conservation. And I had part of like the PhD, I had a chapter that I wanted to do, like field work for, and that had conservation implications. So I tried to apply for that and I got that funding.
And for that also you worked in Germany or?
Yeah, so I was still based in Germany because my PhD was from there, right? But the work was across several different institutes with several different people, including University of Mauritius. We worked with researchers in the Comoros, in the island of Mayotte, in La Réunion. So we worked with NGOs as well as universities, and also collaborated with a bunch of other places in Europe to do the data, like to do the analysis, because we had to do stable isotope analysis, and those are the kind of things that I was not an expert in. I am not an expert in, so we had to establish new collaborations for that. So that project was with loads and loads of people and a lot of incredible, yeah, talent and experts in very different topics.
Okay, so I think we have come to an end. And before uh, ending this such a beautiful and experience-rich session, what would be your take-home message from your whole journey of PhD and postdoc, from fieldwork? What would you suggest to someone who is just done of masters and looking to the PhD?
Um, yeah, so my suggestion would be, don't get bogged down by either not getting the PhD position of your dreams or not being able to pass some entrance exam that will give you a PhD position, don't get bogged down by it. I think if you have ideas to do research, be bold, talk to people, write cold emails, be shameless, ask if they have money, and if they can, if you can get hired to work with them. I think it's very important to be openly communicative. So the most important thing is to be a bit shameless. Don't be shy. Approach people, and they might say no. That's like the worst thing that's going to happen. And if it's the kind of projects where you have to do field work and it has conservation implications, then you should definitely apply for a lot of these grants, small grants that are available to start field work. So you can do the work whether you're a PhD student or not, right? And at that point when I started, that was my mind was like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do a PhD, but I'm going to do the research anyway. So you go ahead, and then I think it can work out. But sometimes it won't either, and I understand it's not possible for everyone. For example, not having a salary for many months is not a realistic possibility for a lot of people. So this advice obviously take it with a pinch of salt. If you have commitments, go for a job. Like and you can always come back to a PhD later, you know.
Nice suggestion. And those, we all, when we are doing PhD, so we go through this sometime existential crisis while even we are doing it, and sometime not matching the deadline, and sometime feeling like whether it will end or not, and when it's going to end. So some and maximum, I think PhD scholars, uh, some goes for a longer time period, some for the small. So what would you suggest who are actually struggling now and they are actually doing PhD, as you have just crossed that path? Those who are struggling mentally and just trying to catch hold on timelines, what would you suggest?
See, this is such a difficult question to answer because this is so person specific. So, see, for some people,
Mm-hmm.
having the right kind of support system can make a huge difference, like having your friends around you who will lift you up, uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even in your worst times, like have those friends around you, I would say. And if you feel low about yourself because you think your quality of research is bad, talk to 5 different people from completely 5 different backgrounds and get their honest perspective, and try to understand if it is really because your research is bad or is it because you're feeling an imposter syndrome. And all of us have some level of imposter syndrome in academia. So I think we always sort of end up underselling ourselves or underappreciating ourselves. So it's very difficult to give generic advice, but I would feel like if you're going through this, talk to people around you and, talk about it honestly. And if this is something that is impacting your life to a very deep extent, then quit. It's really good to quit. There is nothing wrong in quitting. I honestly believe there is nothing wrong in quitting. Maybe you'll get a better PhD position after you quit your first one. It's a degree. It's great if you can have it. It's also cool if you don't have it. There's so many researchers doing good work without a PhD. And so my advice is if it gets to that point where you're thinking about very serious things in life, don't let a PhD, get you that down. It's not worth it. So yeah.
On that positive note, I think we can sum it up here. So thank you so much, Ashwini. It was such a nice time I had having this conversation with you, and I am very much sure people would have enjoyed, those who joined. And also this downloaded version of this will be available, so they can come in and they can go through your journey. So
Thank you so
thank
much
you
for
so
this
much.
opportunity. And I love the name of your page.
I just woke up one day, and on Saturday fine morning, and it just popped up because people do ask, "और कितना पढ़ोगे भाई? बस करो." PhD हो गई,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you might be getting,
Yeah.
PhD तक तो ठीक है. दिल्ली मतलब कि यहाँ इंडिया में तो so many people might not be even knowing postdoc नाम की भी कोई चीज होती है. Those who are actually very much not too much into academic things and all.
Yeah.
So they'll be,
You're totally right.
so for them it will be अभी भी पढ़ाई चल रही है. You're
Yeah.
still studying, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining and all the very best for your research. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for the opportunity again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.